Okay, good afternoon, Year 9. I'm afraid it can't be a live lesson today as I'm in on the key worker duty, but we've got some problem solving today based on our angles and parallel lines that we've been looking at over the last couple of lessons. So I've got a diagram for our starter here where we've got an angle that's labelled as 110 degrees, and I'd like us to find another angle of size 110 degrees, but also then for part B, give a reason. This is a classic exam style question here where we've got to give a reason for the angle. Now, there are loads of angles that actually equal 110 as well on this diagram. So you might actually be able to do 2 or 3 or even more versions of this starter activity. So I'll leave that to you, and if you want to pause the video or stop the presentation, and then when you're ready to come back to it, I'll assume that answers have been completed. Okay, so other angles that are equal to 110. So I'll go through all the options you could possibly have. So we could have angle B here. This is also equal to 110, and that's because of opposite angles. Angle B is opposite 110. We could also have, if I just change colour, we could also have the angle D is 110 degrees here, and this is because we'd make the Z shape, and this would be because of alternate angles. Or the final version that you could have, and the final reasoning for this, it's going to show up orange maybe, is that we could have the F shape coming down here, and that would link 110 and F coincidentally, and then F would equal 110 as well because of our, if we've made the F shape, we're then looking at corresponding angles. So this should give us all of the different versions of answering this question that we could have. So we've got all of the 110 degree angles measured there and given reasons, but you only need one of those to get the answer for this question. So we're looking today at doing some problem solving with these angles and parallel lines. Now, I'm going to show us the quick ways of doing these, but I'm also going to talk about the long-winded version. What we've mentioned before is the fact that there's usually going to be a Z for our alternate angles or an F for our corresponding angles that we can find on the diagram that will immediately get us to our final answer that we're after, or very, very close to it. But it doesn't mean that's the only way of solving these problems, and we'll see that much later on when we get into the more difficult versions. So it's not a problem here if you sometimes fill in some of the blank angles that aren't labelled here and work those out along route. So here in question 1, you might be able to pause the video and work ahead if you're feeling confident. So part A here, the quickest way of doing this would be to find F shape here, and that links 110 with A. So A is 110 because of corresponding angles. B, the quickest way of doing this, you'd be able to spot a Z shape. So B is also 47 degrees because of alternate angles. There's this backward Z in part C that links 115 again because it's alternate if we've used the Z shape, no matter the fact that it was a reversed one. And then angle D, again, there's going to be a reflected F going backwards here that links 63 and D. So D is equal to 63 degrees because of corresponding. Now, as I said, these wouldn't be the only way you could find that angle. They're the quickest way, definitely. But in part A, you might have been able to spot a Z shape instead. And then you'd have worked out that this angle over here is 110 degrees because of alternate angles. And then you'd have to do opposite angles there to say that A is 110, so you do it in 2 steps. Likewise, you might have been able to work out angles on a straight line here and get this one being 133 degrees over here. Remember, angles on a straight line have to add to 180. And then you might be able to find an F shape, and then you'll be able to get the angle down here is also 133 degrees, and then you'll be able to do angles on a straight line again and get the angle to be B as 47 by using some angles on a straight line and corresponding angles and then angles on a straight line again. So you're not pigeonholed into one way of doing it, but there should be a quick way, and if you can't spot a really, really quick way of getting very close to where your missing angle is, perhaps have another look at these problems, although as you say, you can do them in multiple steps. So there's two here that I'd like you guys to have a look at, and when you are ready to continue, then if you want to unpause the video, and then I'll go through the answers to these. So these are going to have a link of your problem. So some of it's to do with parallel lines, some of it's to do with our other angle properties. Okay, so again here, I would go maybe in alphabetical order is usually a bit of a hint on these questions. So I could get angle H straight away here because we've got angles on a straight line. So I'm going to put that H. I've labelled my diagrams before. This is how we'd have to label it up in an exam situation I'm going to go through now. So we're going to say that H equals 50 because of angles on a straight line. We've got two angles here together on a straight line that have to add to 180. So we don't need to actually show the subtraction that we're doing. That would be pretty handy for working out. So H equals 50, and then the reason is angles on a straight line equal 180 degrees. We'd now need to find out a way of getting to angle I. Now, if I know that angle H is already 50 degrees for my first part of the question, I can then look and find a capital F shape here that links H and I straight away. So I know that angle I is 50 degrees. So again, I'd say that I is 50 degrees as well. But the reasoning now is corresponding angles, because I've used the F shape. So that's what we'd need to get the full marks on a question. It's really important to give the reasons because a lot of the angles in these problems are the same, and so the reason is needed to get the full marks. It's very common in a GCSE exam for you to just get 0 marks if you've given 50 for those answers. Even though 50 degrees is the answer, if you haven't given a reason, they might not give you any marks for it. So reasoning is really, really important. So for part B here, there's a couple of ways of doing this one. I'll go in alphabetical order first, so J then K. So J, we can work out first, there's a Z shape coming through here. So we can work out the fact that J and 63 are the same. So J equals 63 degrees. We've used the Z shape, so that's alternate angles. And then we can move to the second part of the problem and get K. And now I could actually use a capital F shape being turned around and link J and K together. So K also equals 63 degrees, but this time through corresponding angles. And again, there could have been other ways of doing that problem. What we could have done, if we go into green now, I could have actually found K first by using opposite angles. 63 and K are where two straight lines cross, so opposite angles would have told us that 63 is K. That's another valid way of getting angle K. And then we could have used the F actually to jump up from K to J that way, and said that they're corresponding angles. So there's a couple of ways you see of doing each of these problems, but we're going to layer on the difficulty. You're going to start off by finding just an F or just a Z. In more complicated problems like this, we're then going to have one of our other angle properties in. We can see things getting gradually more difficult as we get through. So here's a proper question from a GCSE on this, and you can see here they've been quite generous because they've separated out the angles and the reasons here. I say it's sometimes the case that they don't, so no reason, no marks. But here we've got to give the size of those angles and also reasons. So here it might be useful to work in alphabetical order. We'll run through this in just a second. So again, pause the video until you've had a go and unpause when you're ready to see the answers. So here we've got write down the size of angle X. Now straight away I shouldn't need any parallel line work here. We should be able to spot those opposite angles there where two straight lines cross. So X is 53 degrees. So put that here and give a reason for the answer. We'll use opposite angles. Write down the size of angle Y. Now you've actually got two choices here. The first method, if I do in red, would be we've got an upside down F. So the upside down F tells us that Y is 53 degrees. And then if I've used an F shape, I've used corresponding angles. Or we could have actually have spotted a capital Z shape that I've got now in purple. And then that would link 53, the one that was already labelled, and then Y. So Y is 53. So we've got two rules that will actually work here. The corresponding angle, or alternate, depending on how you're looking at the problem for this. And then we can start to get more and more and more lines going on. Now, the first part A here, we've seen several like this before. So we've got angles on a straight line, here and here. That's really common to see. So we know that these two have to add up to make 180. That makes that 17 degrees. We could then have maybe, and we haven't seen this one yet, but we can maybe use our co-interior angles here because we've got the C shape going on. But again, you could find Z, you could find F's, and use your alternate and corresponding angles here. I know that if co-interior angles add to make 180, this must also be 163. But again, a few of you might have already spotted that we could have also have proved that using a capital F here. We've got 163 and C matched up straight away. So again, as I said, there's no real absolute method that you have to follow in these questions. There's going to be lots of co-interior angles, the C shape. There's going to be lots of alternate angles, the Z shape. There's going to be lots of F angles, the corresponding angles, the F shape. And they're all going to be able to be valid for solving these problems. But try not to find yourself too many angles that are just floating around and unlabelled, otherwise you might be missing the point. But again, if it gets you to the answer, no one's to say that that was an incorrect method. It might just be not as efficient as it needs to be. So we're still missing angle B here, and again we've got a couple of options. Probably the easiest is to say that with C it's on a straight line here, so it'd be 17 degrees, but by all means there's also a Z shape here. So you can say that it's alternate to angle A, and we can get it for being 17 as well. Now I haven't written down the angle facts yet, so let's pop those down. So I got angle A equals 17 because of angles on a straight line. Now because they're not equal to each other here, I've got to say what they add up to. Angles on a straight line equal 180 degrees. I then got C as 163. Now I used co-interior angles, but if we use the F shape, you'd have been using corresponding angles, remember? And then angle B is 17 degrees. I know I did angles on a straight line again, but we could have used the green line. I'll put that rule down. The green line, remember, the Z shape is alternate angles. Now things look a little bit trickier in part B because we've got two different straight lines that cross our parallel ones. So remember, our key lines here are our parallel ones that I've just labelled, and these must be like the tops and bottoms of our Z's, or the crossbars of our capital F shape. If you use your other lines, you're not going to be able to get the correct angle. So for example, you cannot say up here, down here and across here is a Z shape. You cannot say, if I just delete those lines, you cannot say that these like three lines would make an F shape, because these bars here are not our parallel ones. So you've got to be quite careful with these. So this can actually leave us to have quite a few different parts of a problem appearing now. When we've got these two straight lines crossing, there'll be different Z's and different F's you can make on these problems for different alternate and different corresponding angles. So on this one, I'd maybe be saying I've got a Z shape here. There's also definitely one here, but they're not going to be quite the same because they're using different lines that cross our parallel ones, which are called transversals, so different transversals. But the first Z I drew links 125 with angle D, so that's 125 degrees. My second one, however, would have linked 105 with this angle here, so down here we don't need it, but we've got 105 degrees. So watch out for the fact that not all of the Z's on these more complicated problems, not all alternate angles are exactly the same as each other. It depends on where they're drawn in the problem. And then over here, I've got opposite angles where two straight lines cross, so this is going to be 105 degrees. So that'd be solving that problem. So do watch out when they get a bit more complicated. So I'm going to ask you guys to have a look at a Corbett worksheet, which is on parallel lines. I should have linked it to it underneath the video today, but it's also in the Learning Cycle 3 Week 7 files. The answers in a Corbett sheet, remember, they are linked to at the bottom, so there should be like a green tick and a red cross at the bottom of the worksheet. Click on that and it should open it up in your internet browser to get the answers, and please self-mark before uploading it to Class Notebook. There are a couple of us who still have a few pieces of work to upload to Class Notebook. It'd be a very good idea to be doing that before the end of this week, so you can make sure that you've got everything that you need where it should be. So I'll leave that over to you. Please do get in touch if you do need any help. It might not be absolutely immediately that I can get back to you, but please be patient. And remember, my email is red@theroyal.school. But depending on where I am, I should be able to have my phone on as well, and it'll beep if you send me a message through on Teams as well. So thank you very much. Now we will have a look at this during next lesson as well, so I can give you a bit of live help. So if you don't get absolutely everything finished, that should be absolutely fine, but you should be able to get through, the majority of one of the A4 sides of this worksheet in today's lesson. Thank you very much, and best of luck with your work.